to his story 24, resonating to next big thing number 4, which I have described previously as print. Now, before I go on, I'd like to describe sort of the context for the next big things that I have postulated, have possibly decoded in the history of all next big things. It's probably presumptuous of me to determine that I've determined which were the history of next big things in order to predict the future of next big things. But let me first say this. In identifying the next big things, I pretty much identified those next big things that mankind created. Therefore, certain things, such as numbers, mathematics, which are sort of created by the creator because they were created when we got fingers and everything else that you could count. Well, even though the Arabs discovered and sort of decoded the numbers, as I understand. But anyway, the point is this, that wasn't included in the next big things because man didn't invent it. And some things were part of a bigger thing, and well, they didn't necessarily become next big things. Like, for example, why did I suggest that print was the next big thing rather than writing? Well, the key is that print is far more scalable, and what you'll find as you explore all the next big things that I've described is they all have a central thing in common. That central thing or theme is the network effect. And the network effect is, well, in the confluence and convergence, it's the networking of a network effect that'll change the world beyond your mind. And so think about print in the context of, well, see, what we've known as print is now changing with the internet, and we're proliferating the possibility. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if you count a small number of years, and in that small number of years or decades, call it 50, we've created more content than the last eternity of mankind combined. It will be possible that in a decade will create more content than all content created combined. That's sort of a changing dynamic in the proliferation of information. And that is both a problem and an opportunity. Why it's a problem is, while we democratize the information and make it available, and by the way, that is partly taking place in our power structure when you strived big thing 1 monopoly and democracy of 2 and travel is democracy is 3 and travel is 2. Well, this thing of democracy is traveling throughout the world, but we really don't even have a practical way to practice it without the context of governments, which is going to be part of the discussion as we move forward. As I've described, I've imagineered a future where there are no nations and no governments, but that we join the interests of nations and governments into a single human enterprise, a business charitable enterprise designed and dedicated for the advancement of all people, backed by a single World Bank. But let's go back to this information revolution that we're talking about. Now, think about this, is that all of this information, all of the books, all of the knowledge that we have, it's actually beyond the comprehension of a single human being. But we've learned, like from Hal on Jeopardy, we've learned that we have the ability, using the technologies of artificial intelligence, to create intelligence beyond our own intelligence. We have the ability to take our best intelligence, put it into a computer, and advance beyond what any single mind or even collection of minds could do, as a computer could comprehend the complexity of the entire model of our planet and, well, could help us compute a better future together. So let's talk about print. By the way, just for those of you who might say, well, I'll ask the question, who invented print? And, well, many of those from the West will say, yes, it was Gutenberg and his Bible. And, well, if Wiki's right, and I have no way of knowing if it isn't, but Wiki's part of the dynamic of a world in which information can become free and it can be freely available. But if Wiki's right, the Chinese invented print. Well, why aren't they given credit for it? Well, the Chinese had way too many characters to deal with print, and Gutenberg had the advantage of fewer characters, and at the beginning of the thing, all he needed to do is print one book, the Gutenberg Bible. Now, so when we look at print, did the history of print came from? Well, it came from writing. And where did writing come from? It was preceded by language. Now, why is this important? Because as we look at information going forward, we must pass between truth and lies, between good and evil, between right and wrong. And if we can't, then this massive information could do more harm than good. But so how do we find true good? And that is sort of the challenge, and that's where I believe that this becomes an inflection point in human history, where our technologies can harken back to everything in human history, and we will go towards the future together if we should choose. Now, let me discuss my imagined vision of what our knowledge was all about. Now, you have to go back to the beginning of, before the written word. The greatest books were oral traditions, the Hindu Bible, and then the Jewish Bible, I think, were oral traditions and ultimately written down. And actually, interestingly, in the Bible calls the numbers or letters in Hebrew have numbers associated. That's interesting, but put it aside. And then, well, even the Quran was an oral tradition before they even had the Arabic language. Now, the point is this, that the first books, I would articulate it, the first software code for mankind were our Bibles. So, from those Abrahamic religions, go back to Genesis. Now, it said our Creator created man in the image of God. Man and woman, I assume, in the image of God. Now, it also talked about the tree of knowledge and life. I'm not going to go into all the interpretations, but as we go forward, we must pass the tree of human knowledge and life to find truth. And so, how do we do that? Well, there are lots of lessons and information and prophets within the Bible, but I think the most important of the Jewish prophecies, notwithstanding all of the beautiful parts of the books, is the prophecy of Isaiah. He will rebuke many people and judge among the nations, for they will learn war no more, and we'll have justice and peace on earth. Now, I believe that our entire creation from beginning of time was for mankind to achieve the intelligence of his own design, to realize that we could create our own heaven on earth. Now, those of you sitting around for eternal salvation, I don't want to tell you that it might not happen. We might mess this up. But my point is this. What if God endowed us with creating heaven on earth? Then are we not in his own image, designed to procreate and become our own creator of such a creation? That's a question you can answer or not. Anyway, so that's the question at the heart of the story as I am trying to tell it. So where we go from here in the Abrahamic context of religion? Well, we go to a very famous Jew who, well, I would argue, in the paradigm of things, got some very interesting information because sort of around the time of Judaism, preceding it, was Hinduism. And then after Hinduism, Buddhism. And within the context of the Eastern religions, they had a different view of life, the wheel of life, but they had the notion of karma. And that notion of karma was delivered by Jesus Christ to the Jews. Well, in our time frames, around zero. It's BC 80, 0, E, 80, anyway, 0. Anyway, 2,000 years ago, 2010, 12 years ago. Okay, so it depends on when you're watching this. It could be lots longer than that. Depends on if you ever see this. You may never see this anyway. That's up to who. Anyway, so here's the thing. You go back those 2,000 years, and well, the Jews did not accept Jesus as Christ because he did not become king of them. He did not exercise the power. But wait a minute. If he was the virtual Son of God, if he was the best human being ever made in an image of God, which those of you Muslims who accept Christ as the Messiah, as the prophet prophesied, while he said God has no partners, those of you who accept him as Messiah should recognize that he is the best image ever of God. So what is the meaning of that image? What was his image? Why did he not become king? Very simply, the image was not a God of power, as you would see power of the sword. It would be power of the mind and the soul and the truth. That's all Jesus needed, was that power. And he had that power, and he had that path, and he had the message. When he gave his life to recognize for all humanity the sanctity of our life, and for us to recognize a different paradigm of economics, a paradigm that we have never been able to recognize because we have never been able to create a new paradigm of our entire reality. We have never been able to change our power structure to realize the vision. Well, just think about this. They got really excited when Jesus fed a few thousand people, bread and wine, fish and stuff a day. Imagine if we could build a world filling everybody fish and bread and things for life. Imagine we could have healthcare and housing, because there's no limit to what we could build, as I've stated before. When we build it from one enterprise, one global enterprise, one global bank, one enterprise under God. And that's where we must get to our software code. And I don't know the answers, but I know that if we go and pass our reality within the religions and within our own laws today, we can agree on truth and justice. And if we can agree on truth and justice, we can agree on a context to translate and merge our economic interests together, canceling politics and corruption, creating an enterprise of direct people to an enterprise of us, ruled by us, but allowing leaders to lead, and creating a context for greater wealth and prosperity for all. And that can be done in the context of a single global world bank, because if you build it, well, what happens then? That's the next